The sun rose heavy over the dry fields of Eldermore, casting long shadows on a village long forgotten by hope. Once rich with laughter, stories, and dreams, it had become a place where even the birds sang in mourning. Here, girls were not born with futures, they were born with prices. When food turned scarce and crops failed year after year, tradition twisted into tragedy, daughters were auctioned off to survive. It wasn't evil. At least, that's what the elders whispered. It was necessity. Fathers and mothers wept as they stood beside their daughters, calling for bids not from greed, but from desperation. The buyers, older men from the cities, some cold, some cruel, rarely looked the girls in the eye. By 15, most girls were gone. Only one was left. Mira. 16, with wild raven-black hair and eyes that mirrored the lake's dusk. She was not spared by chance. She was spared by fire. At 13, Mira had stood in the center of the village square, dressed in faded blue, her father trembling beside her. But when the first man raised his hand to bid, Mira stepped forward. "I am not for sale," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Gasps followed. Her father dropped to his knees, but Mira didn't flinch. "If survival means losing myself," she continued, "then I would rather hunger. I would rather die." Her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet, resolute, and oddly calm. The elders called it madness. Her father called it shame. But something shifted that day. No bids came. No hands rose. Mira walked away. For 3 years, she lived alone on the edge of the village, in a crumbling cottage by the willow trees. She tended a patchy garden, bartered herbs for bread, and refused to leave. Girls whispered about her in secret. "She still has her name," they said. "She walks freely." And then came the widower. He arrived in late spring, with a walking stick carved from cedar and a gaze heavy with loss. His name was Thomas Reed, a quiet man from the north. His wife had died 2 winters ago, and his only child, a daughter, had vanished in a border raid. He came to Eldermore not for business or revenge, but for something unnamed. A pull in his heart, a whisper in his dreams. On his first day, he saw her. Mira was gathering mint beside the riverbank, her hands stained green, her face streaked with sun. She looked up once and nodded. Nothing more. The next day, he came to the market. He bought her herbs without haggling. The day after, he helped her carry firewood. A week passed, then 2. The village watched. Some thought he was another bidder waiting for a private auction. Others warned Mira. But Thomas never spoke of bargains. He spoke of bees, and stars, and the daughter he lost. Mira listened, but never shared. Her walls were high. One rainy morning, as they sat beneath the eaves of the chapel, he asked, "What name would you give yourself, if you could choose?" She looked at him, puzzled. "I never lost my name," she replied. "But you were meant to," he said softly. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She walked to the mirror, the old, cracked one her mother once used, and looked at her reflection. She saw a survivor. But also a prisoner of solitude. A week later, the elders summoned Mira. She hadn't been called in years. They told her the auction must proceed. The village was collapsing. Mira was the last commodity. "You held out long enough," they said. "But now, we must eat." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked out. That evening, as she stared into her garden, a hand gently touched her shoulder. "Thomas." "I heard," he said. She nodded. "I have nothing to offer but a name," he said. "And it is not a cage." She turned. "It's not a trade. I ask for nothing." Still, she hesitated. "You barely know me." "I know what it is to be alone," he said. "To lose a family, then a purpose. I know what courage looks like when the world mistakes it for defiance. And I know that some names aren't given, they're offered." Mira looked away, tears threatening. You think kindness can stop hunger? No, he whispered. But it can start healing. The next morning, the villagers gathered for the final auction. They expected defiance or surrender. They got neither. Mira stepped forward, wearing a dress she had sewn herself, the color of spring moss. Thomas stood beside her, holding a worn book and a single sunflower. We are here not for sale, he began, his voice steady. But for a union. Gasps erupted. The elders rose in protest, but Thomas raised his hand. I have come to offer what no man has in years, a home, not a prison. A name, not a price. And a future, built together. Mira looked at them all, not in anger, but in forgiveness. I was left behind, she said. But I was never lost. Silence held the crowd until one little girl, no more than 10, stepped forward and clapped. Others followed. That day, there was no auction. There was a wedding, not in grandeur, but in grace. A widower and a girl the world tried to discard chose each other freely. No price. No chains. Years later, Eldermore changed. Slowly at first. Girls stayed. Fields revived. The tradition died, not with protest, but with a choice. Mira and Thomas built a home filled with laughter, stories, and children, not all theirs by blood, but all theirs by love. The cottage by the willow became a refuge for girls who once feared their birthdays. And whenever someone asked Mira what saved her, she never said rebellion. She said, a name offered, not taken. And somewhere in the fields of Eldermore, where sorrow once ruled, sunflowers bloom, wild, unapologetic, and free.